What up? Welcome back to another video on one of the YouTube channels ever, and today we're going to be talking about the Moist Critical slash Penguinz0 situation, and unlike his typical situations where he's usually being attacked for no reason at all, this time he's actually the one that has given the awful take. And just off of that alone, you're probably already super surprised, Moist Critical being the one to give a garbage take, really? And you wouldn't be the only one in being surprised. Even Charlie himself is clearly surprised by this development because he's not handling it very well at all. It seems like he got so used to being the person that gives the pretty grounded, correct, normal take that he just doesn't know what to do when he gives a bad take. But before we go too deep into it, let's go over what this take that he actually gave was. And getting into it, the two contestants of today's beef is of course going to be involving Moist Critical and Sneako. Yup, you heard that name right. The last time I heard anything about Sneako was when he got punched in his face for knocking a security guard's hat off. And the last time most of you probably heard anything about Sneako, most likely was the last Moist Critical versus Sneako drama, which we of course all know how that one ended. But Sneako recently sparked a new beef with them over the Chris Tyson situation. He was pretty much calling him out and basically calling him a punk for not reporting on the Chris Tyson situation.
Yo, look out, Moist Critical is not gonna go talk about the Chris situation because he wants to have the Mr. Beast collab.
And a while after that happened, Moist Critical of course uploaded his video on the Chris Tyson situation, and in that video, he also addressed Sneako, calling him out for this.
I was always going to make a full breakdown of this because it's bad. It's a horrible situation. So yes, you're right. I do talk about like big trending bad shit like Dr. Disrespect or like Cody Ko most recently. I don't know why people thought I wouldn't talk about this. So I've never been someone to shy away from a bad situation like this just because I know or am familiar with the person that it's about. He has no problem abandoning his morals and defending blatant brushing it under the rug as long as it means it keeps the Mr. Beast collab alive. For you to make insinuations like that and even claims like that is f***ing unhinged, considering you make actual defense arguments constantly.
And after this small back and forth between them, they ended up hopping on a video call together to have another debate, and most people aren't really too sure who won this one because they both gave some pretty bad takes. And before we get into Moist Critical's take and how bad it is, we sadly have to first listen to Sneako's take and what he's trying to defend here because it really plays a huge role in why Charlie's take is so bad.
I'm talking about your personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
So before this clip even continues, I just want to pause it there right quick because you can probably already see where this is going, and the main point that Sneako always tries to defend is a fluid age of consent, pretty much, whatever that means. I'm also sure that I don't need to tell you guys how outrageous of a take that is. A fluid age of consent based on maturity rather than age. Also, right quick, before I play the next clip, I just wanted to give a shout out to the channel Jamar, because that's where I got most of the clips for this. The debate that they had was, I think, 3 hours long, and I really didn't feel like sifting through that entire debate, nor did I feel like loading up Twitter to try to find it, and I'm sure I don't need to give a reason for that. It really speaks for itself.
I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people and the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but there are...
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for... I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore. Anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved? Why should we get the government involved?
Well,
why would I tell them if everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
So after hearing that outrageous take, I'm sure I obviously don't need to tell you everything wrong with it because you probably already know. And Moist Critical's point here was pretty much the same thing that everyone thinks, and that's that there's no way that this would be okay because someone under the age of 18 just doesn't have the mental capacity to be able to consent to something like that. They're obviously not mentally developed enough to be able to make decisions like that even with the help of their parents. parents. And after he made this point, it looks like Sneako possibly grew a fraction of a brain for a second and managed to set up a trap card that really anyone else wouldn't have fallen for, but Moist Critical seemed to walk straight into it.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting, as you agree with.
Okay. So as long as everyone...
If your parents are okay with it and you are okay with it, I think that's totally a familial decision to make, yeah.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a big fan of Sneako or basically anything that he does or stands for, but I have to give him a bit of credit where it is due. It's not like that's some sort of super advanced, high-level debating strategy, but taking someone's logic that they used in a previous statement and using it against them with great success at least takes a bit of brain power, and I just have to give him credit for that. And what's harder to believe than Sneako successfully setting up a trap is Critical actually falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. You can honestly almost tell that even Sneako himself is surprised. As soon as he fell for it, he just started breaking down laughing. He was probably just thinking in his head, no way he actually just said this. This just completely contradicted his previous point.
So, a child can cut their off and take hormone blockers and change their biology forever, but they can't get married?
Well, that's a decision that now extends beyond the family, because now you're bringing in a different party. So if you have someone that's your age coming in saying, I want to marry that child, I don't think that can happen under any circumstance.
I know I just said it a second ago, but it's truly crazy how contradicting this is. He's basically using the exact same argument that Sneako used for the age of consent, but instead, he's using it for transitioning or changing your gender, which I obviously know that these are two completely different things, but they really stand on the same grounds when it comes to what age you should be able to do these things at. It's crazy to see Sneako winning a argument/debate, and I'm not saying winning here in the sense that he's completely blowing him out, but at this point, they're both just giving absolutely brain-dead takes, which really just makes them equal in this debate, and I truly believe that going neutral or even in a debate with Sneako is the same thing as losing. It's also just hard for me to wrap my head around how Charlie is messing up this bad. I don't know how he doesn't realize that he's basically arguing for the exact same thing that Sneako is saying, but just in a slightly different situation. They're both arguing about whether kids should be able to make huge, life-changing decisions, which in either case, it's a no. Even though changing your gender technically really doesn't involve another party, that doesn't mean a kid should be able to do it, even with the help of their parents, because they're both decisions that will heavily change your life, and in most cases, permanently.
Okay, if I'm 16, and I personally want to marry this girl. She's beautiful. She's 21 years old. Her family wants to do it. My family wants to do it. You're saying I can't do that. We're both consenting. I'm ready to go. I'm physically mature. But I'm not allowed to marry because Moy says that woman's a... But if then, the next day I leave it, I'm depressed, I want to cut my penis off, I can go right into the clinic, snip it off, and start taking HRT like Chris Tyson. That's a society that makes sense to you?
It is. I believe everyone has I believe everyone has the right to do with their body what they want to do.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm sure we've heard more than enough of this debate to know where both parties stand on their topics. And after this debate was all said and done and actually released, Moist Critical of course started seeing a ton of hate and criticism for his takes. And just a day after the debate, he kinda tried to roll back what he said a bit in his live stream.
And now I give a perspective on something that immediately gets misconstrued. And I do recognize a lot of it's my fault. I assumed that Sneako was talking in hyperbole about a 9-year-old getting their cut off, because I didn't have the assumption that anyone thought that is how transitioning works. Under no circumstances, any legality behind a kid saying, I want to change genders, and then immediately going in and getting their cut off. That doesn't happen. I thought he was just talking in hyperbole. I thought he was talking about the overall point of a child transitioning, which is years-long process. And you can't even get that surgery legally until you are 18.
I know I say this a decent amount on the channel, but I really want to make sure that everyone knows that I obviously don't think that I always have the correct takes and the answers to every situation, and this is one of them where I have no clue what he's talking about. It looks like he's trying to say that he didn't quite understand what Sneako was asking him, which I'm not buying. He asked him that question just about as blatantly as you possibly could have, so I'm really not understanding what he could have even thought that he meant by this. He's also trying to say that he thought he was speaking in like hyperbole or whatever, and even if that was the case, that doesn't change your answer. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt here and assume that he thought he was specifically talking about everything else involved in the process of transitioning, not including the part where you're getting your body parts chopped off. Even if that was the case, this is still a terrible answer and one that you shouldn't be standing by, because the other main thing involved in the process of transitioning is something that he even acknowledges himself, and that's taking different hormone blockers and different hormone therapy and things along those lines, which you of course still shouldn't be able to decide to do as a kid, because even though that isn't something quite as serious as removing or changing body parts, it's still a very heavy decision that can alter your life permanently. And after all the backlash and criticism that he received for these rancid takes, he dropped another bombshell piece of information, or I should say his podcast team dropped a bombshell of information, and that came in the form of a statement saying that he's quitting his podcast indefinitely. And the post reads, "Effective immediately, Charlie has made the decision to leave both the official podcast and the Red Thread. He wants to go on an indefinite hiatus to scale back his time spent on the internet. We obviously wish him the best, for everyone to respect his decision, and for all to know that the show will always be open for him to drop by and talk shop should he wish to return." And after this post, this is really where most of the confusion in this situation was developed. It seems like a huge portion of the internet, after reading this, or the lack thereof, just immediately cling to the idea that this means that he's permanently quitting all of the internet together, including his YouTube channel. And all this really does is show off how bad people are at reading and understanding basically anything. Because at the top of the post, it pretty much says, hey, he's specifically stepping away from the podcast. But the other huge thing that most people were thinking after this post came out is that Moist Critical is just a punk. Basically everyone, including myself for a while, was just thinking that he just upped and completely quit his podcast because he got absolutely smoked by Sneako in a debate and he can't take the hate from it. And while I'm sure that that definitely did play a huge role in him leaving his podcast, I honestly think that the reason is much simpler, and it's also the reason that he gave in his most recent video that he talked about the situation himself. And that's that he mainly stepped away solely to reduce his time on the internet. And he said the reason for that being is that he was really becoming what he hates the most, and that's chronically online people that just give the worst takes ever because they're chronically online. They don't know anything except the internet. And that honestly seems like a much more reasonable reason. In him saying that, it also kind of makes a bit more sense on why he gave such a bad take, because he's just chronically online and his mind has been corrupted to a internet brain. Because it honestly seems like he really gave that take not because he truly believes it, but because he was just trying to play the right side of the fence and give the correct take. But in this situation, it clearly didn't work out and he chose the wrong take. But even with that, he still didn't roll back his take too much. He still kind of firmly believes that these children should be able to take different hormones and stuff like that, which most people, of course, still don't agree with. But with that said, that's pretty much it talking about the rare Moist Critical L, and if you made it this far in the video, you probably liked something, so you may as well drop a like and maybe even subscribe. You'd be helping us get one step closer to 1 billion subscribers. But I'm not gonna hold y'all for too long, so I'll catch you guys in the next one.